will take just an old plastic cup or something. I'll soak my seed in water for about 2 hours before I plant. It just hydrates the seed and really gets it to germinate faster. But I'm sitting here with this cup that I've had the beans or peas or whatever soaking in. I'll just put my fingers over it and pour the water off so that my seed is really wet. I'll just sprinkle a little bit of this stuff. I mean, it's almost like graphite. It's so fine. Maybe not quite that fine, but just probably the equivalent in a big tall cup. I'll put the equivalent of maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon or 1/2 a teaspoon or something in there. Shake it up a little bit, and it just totally coats the seed. And then I just go plant the seed. Now, as long as you are planting in the same area, you only have to treat once. This treatment will last year after year after year after year. There's still plenty of this bacteria in the soil. But if you grew your green beans here last year and you grow them over there this year, well, you better treat the seed again because you don't have the huge amount of the bacteria over there. The only thing it works on is beans and peas. So don't waste your time doing okra seed or anything else with it. That would be a total waste. There's something else to put on okra that I'll talk about in just a second. But inoculating your legumes is going to be a real good thing to give you better production. Now, beans in particular, we tend to have two kinds of beans. We call them pole beans and bush beans, or runner beans and bush beans, or whatever else. And they have totally different growth habits. The beans look and taste, in my opinion, exactly the same. And with some varieties of bean, you can get either a pole bean or a bush bean. The advantage to bush beans is that they produce much more quickly. Most bush beans will begin to produce in about 42 to 45 days. The disadvantage, and they produce very heavily when they produce. The disadvantage to bush beans is that they produce for a relatively short period of time, for only a few weeks. The other disadvantage to bush beans is you have to do this to pick them. And, I pick and give away a lot of produce from my garden, but if anybody wants beans, come pick them yourself if they're bush beans, because I'm not going to spend that much time bent over picking beans. But if you want a lot of beans, literally, in my garden, a row that's from here to here with bush beans, just one row, I'll pick, enough to fill up a 2-quart saucepan in about this much of the row. And I'm, picking up beans to feed 6 or 8 people from one row on a daily basis. Bush beans really, really produce, but they don't produce for as long. Pole beans, on the other hand, take longer to begin producing. Instead of 40-some-odd days, it's usually 60-some-odd or even 70-some-odd days before they start to put on the beans. But then they will produce all summer. And you can stand here and pick them like this instead of, bent over picking them. So plant what you like. They're both very good, things to do. And again, I'm talking mainly hot weather, warm weather plants here. You're missing out if you're not growing snow peas. $4.99 a pound for those little edible pod peas. And you can use your tomato cages that you're not growing anything else on in the winter to grow wonderful snow peas. And again, make a lot of friends when you're picking snow peas. Yes?
What are the best times to plant snow peas here?
I plant them in usually around the 1st of January. The reason is that with snow peas and other peas, true peas, green peas, freezing weather does not hurt the plants, but it destroys the flowers. You will not get any produce in freezing weather. So you want to plant early enough that the plants are maturing and starting to produce just about the time we're past the danger of hard freezes. Because they're only going to produce up till it gets real hot, then the aphids are going to eat them up and they're gone. Okay, let's talk about okra for a minute. Everybody like okra? Yeah. You just haven't had good okra.
I'm a Yankee.
I was going to say, you must not be from the South if you don't like okra. The problems with okra is very susceptible to a disease called cottony root rot. And, well, you get fire ants too, but we can talk about fire ants in a minute. But I told you about how to inoculate the seed with the legumes, with the bacteria. If you have a problem with cottony root rot on just about anything, this product you need to know about. It's called actinovate. And this, again, is a bacteria. And what this bacteria does, it's amazing what we're finding. With chemical fertilizer, you kill off most of the life in the soil. And the more you fertilize, the more you have to treat and spray and do everything else. When you have good, healthy soil, it's not nearly as much of a problem. But this is a bacteria which produces, in effect, an antibiotic which gets rid of cottony root rot. So when I plant something that is susceptible to cottony root rot, whether it is a seed like okra or whether it's a plant like hibiscus, you know, in the case of hibiscus, I'll just sprinkle a little bit of this on the root system when I plant. When I'm planting okra, back when this stuff was cheaper, I used to just put a little band of it down the row and put my seed on top of it. I don't know whether they improved it or whether they just raised the price, but it's gotten pretty pricey. So I do the same thing. I'll soak my okra seed for a little while, pour the water off, pour a little bit of this in there and shake up the seed and coat the seed, and you just don't have cotton root rot anymore. Now this is something you probably will have to repeat every year. And cotton root rot's a problem where we have alkaline soils. We have highly alkaline soils in this area. If you're going over East Texas where we have acid soil, they just laugh at you. We don't have problems with cotton root rot and acid soils. But in alkaline soils, and boy, if you're ever going to try planting pecan or apple trees, be sure you use this. There are thousands of apple trees die every year from cotton root rot, and this stuff will prevent it. But okra is another hot weather plant, and you're wasting your time to plant your seed too early. What I usually do, I don't ever get around to picking all the okra. You've got to pick it every day if you're going to pick okra. And
what you call the thing? I'm sorry.
actinovate.
What else do you use that for?
Anything that's cotton root rot. Anything in the hibiscus family or the cotton family or the okra family, that's all the cotton family.
But not squash?
Squash not necessary. We'll talk about squash next, and there's a couple of things to know about squash. But anyway, this will stop your cotton root rot problems. But on okra, I'll tell you when I plant my okra. Like I said, I always have a few plants that I don't get around to picking the last of the seed off of, and that seed just falls down into the soil. When I see the okra sprouting from the seed that just fell in the soil, that's when it's time to go ahead and plant it. Now, if you walk in my garden right now, you'll see the rows where I'm going to plant soybeans, where I'm going to plant okra and things like that. And I've done something similar to what I was describing for tomatoes. I've opened up the furrows, I put the fertilizer down the middle of it, put a little compost along, and I'm watering, you know, every time I water in the garden. And then when I do plant, things will just jump out of the ground a whole lot faster. So that's the secret to growing okra. Yes?
How do you apply that to the apple tree?
If you've already got the apple tree growing, not a lot you can do. But if you're going to plant an apple tree, take it out of the container. If it's a bare root tree, just sprinkle it over the roots and put it in the ground. Okay. The last real group of plants that I want to talk about individually are the squash and cucumbers. I'll talk about them at the same time because they're very closely related. Pumpkins and melons would fall into the same category. But
excuse me, Bob, you didn't say anything about corn, you know, when you got the bees and
okay, we can talk about corn if you want to, but to me corn is a waste of time in the average home garden. Because you can grow 100 pounds of tomatoes in the same space you grow 4 ears of corn. We can talk about corn, and he's got lots of land up around Blanco and he can grow corn. I don't have room for it even in my garden, but we can talk about corn in a minute if you like. But everybody ought to be growing some squash and cucumbers, if for no other reason, just that they are so successful. They are so easy to grow. I've known people who said the only people who live out in the country, the only time of year that they lock the doors on their house is in mid-spring, because if they don't lock the doors, the neighbors will sneak in and leave squash on the table. And friend brought me a CD that's got a hilarious song on it about gardening. And you can hear the voice saying in the background, "You have to take squash. We're related." Squash grows so well that that's the one thing that people will get tired of seeing you come around with a fresh bag of produce. Back in the days when Country Spirit Restaurant was active in Bernie, though, I loved it because I could go in with a double handful of bags of squash and have anything on the menu free. You know, it's a good thing to know. But squash is very, very easy. But go ahead and get those. I grow squash in mounds or in hills. I do the same technique I was describing for tomatoes. I'll actually put 2 or 3 cups of fertilizer down and then some ashes, maybe a little Epsom salt so